Good morning to everyone, especially Jessie's unborn child, who today is the size of a head of cauliflower.
Yeah, she is, 27 weeks.
Absolute cutest unborn vegetable I have ever not seen. You are watching The Sweat, everybody, a potentially award-winning program hosted by yours truly, Emerson Lotzia, and to my left, yes, one of the greatest television moms of all time, Jessie Coffield.
Yeah, we're here to bring you 55 minutes of DFS and sports betting advice and analysis. We'll get into some NBA building blocks for tonight's 6-game slate. We'll have a little unofficial NHL Awards show and give out our own awards for the first half of the NHL season as we hit the All-Star break.
All right, we got a double dose of NFL on the menu, which is where we're going to start. DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich and Pierce Dietrich are here. RotoWire's Alan Seslowski. Fellas, we're taking a look at individual player parlays that are available for Super Bowl 56 on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Let's start with the quarterbacks, two former number one overall picks, drafted 11 years apart, making their first appearance in the big game. Joe Burrow, 375 plus passing yards and at least 3 passing touchdowns at plus 1,100 odds. Jeff, those good enough to chase?
So this is a really interesting prop. When I was doing my research for this question, and yes, I actually do perform that service for this show, I found out Joe Burrow hit this prop 3 times this season. It was no, you got to take it with a grain of salt. 2 of them were against the Baltimore Ravens, who legitimately were playing wide receivers at cornerback this year. One of them was against the Chiefs, but I mean, this is certainly doable. I think I like the yardage part of this a lot more than the touchdown part. I don't necessarily like this prop in general. I think plus 1,100 is just a little bit too short. The Rams didn't allow 3 passing touchdowns against once all year, so we're kind of asking for them to just sort of regress all at once here. It could happen, but if you go in the player parlay section, you can get Joe Burrow over 375 passing yards and over 25 rush yards. You can get Joe Burrow over 375 rush yards and a rushing touchdown for plus 2,800, and you can get them for plus 2,200 with that rush yard prop as well. So I like going over on Joe Burrow in these player parlays for the passing yards. I just don't like him with this passing touchdown prop because against the Rams, they're pretty good in the red zone and covering against the pass, but be bullish on Joe Burrow's over in his passing yards.
All right, Pierce, how do you feel about these odds for this bet?
It's just a little too steep for me. 375 passing yards, that's a lot. And this is the playoff defenses they're facing. You just don't get these type of numbers. And as Jeff mentioned, he got them a couple times during the regular season, but it's rare. Now he's got to do it against the 6th best pass DVOA that's got 2 weeks to prepare for this. Yeah, the Rams did allow a quarterback to go over this twice this season, just twice. Kyler Murray went over it, Tom Brady. But more often than not, you don't throw for this many yards in a big-time playoff game against the Rams. He got close to this against the Titans, but the Titans didn't have that quite a secondary. And also, I think the touchdowns odds are a little high, too. We know that the Bengals settle for field goals. We know that the Bengals will give the ball to Mixon. I think they're all just a little too high.
All right, Alan, your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that I'm not sure I'm ever going to be able to look at cauliflower the same way again. But the odds are intriguing enough for me to bite. Those numbers are just a tick above what we can reasonably expect from Joe Burrow, but that's why the odds are sweetened. The key to the Bengals is most likely that high-flying circus dynamic duo of pass catchers with Burrow, so it's a reasonable bet. If we add another 40-yard screen to a scrub like Samaje Perine, that's just gravy on top. Burrow did have that 2-game tear late in the season where he averaged an eye-popping 485 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'll click the button on this one.
Ooh, okay.
All right, fellas, for a running back parlay, Pierce, how do you feel about Joe Mixon, 100-plus rushing yards and 50-plus receiving yards at plus 1,800?
It's tough here as well, but I am much more likely to click the button for this one than I am for Joe Burrow. The payout's better, but I can see this reasonably happening. It's about 10 to 15 yards higher than I would set his ceiling at in receiving or rushing wise. It's probably 10 yards more than where he will typically receive against a pretty good defense in the Rams. But the Rams are 24th when it comes to missed tackles, and we know that they are inconsistent and they make mistakes. And so all we're really asking for is maybe a mistake it turns into a big chunk run, and another mistake that turns into a chunk reception. And I could see this one much more likely to happen. Probably the one bet I like the most on this segment is going to be the Mixon total.
All right, Alan, do you agree? You like this one a bit more enticing?
I usually fade these types of props because casual bettors come online for the Super Bowl, and the books give less favorable odds when they know who the consumer is. But I'm going to give DraftKings credit here. Mixon's likely outcome is not 150, but the odds are there to support the outcome. Mixon hasn't had a big rushing game since week 12 where he had that 165 yards on the ground, but he did have 88 last week. Super Bowls have historically had some big scoring games. The 1800 sounds good to me.
All right, Jeff, does it sound good to you?
So, like kind of Pierce alluded to, it's maybe just a touch too high. Like I think the odds are really close on this one as well, but I'm more bullish on Joe Mixon on the receiving totals this week than I am in the rushing. I think the rushing you're really going to need, like the guys have alluded to, some mistakes by the Rams defense. They just don't make mistakes in the rush game very often. You know, the last time they allowed a 100-yard rusher was like week 4 or something. If you go down further, you can get Cam Akers and Joe Mixon over 50 receiving yards each for plus 2,500. Both of these teams ranked in like the bottom half of the league in terms of receptions allowed to opposing running backs. So it's kind of a leak for both teams. And Mixon and Akers are the best passing backs probably on their team, and they're both going to get lots of run. I like that one more just because the odds are so big, and I think it's realistically got a slightly better chance of happening.
All right, let's move into the pass catchers here. Odell Beckham Jr. has definitely made an impact in LA after moving over from Cleveland, but do you think he can reach 125 receiving yards and 1 touchdown here against the Bengals? So, Alan, you can get that for plus 1,000. Yay or nay?
I'm still in shock that Odell Beckham was on the free market and only the Rams offered him a deal worth taking. Both Green Bay and Kansas City really need to rethink their lives in the offseason. It's clear that Odell and Baker Mayfield were like a married couple staying together for the kids. It's fortunate that Odell has this number 2 role because there's less pressure on him and less coverage on him. We all know that Cooper Kupp is the alpha. This is another great find by our producers, finding another good prop. I like this one.
All right, Jeff. Feeling it?
I'm definitely feeling the touchdown for Odell Beckham. I mean, he's been really, really good in the red zone. He's very good at getting himself open just for Matthew Stafford. And I mean, again, like the issue just comes down to the yardage. I mean, the yards go to Cooper Kupp in this offense. Like we're almost going to have to see like a switch in philosophy here or something on the Rams for Odell Beckham to get over 125 yards. Could he break off an 80-yard touchdown? Absolutely. But I don't know if plus 1,000 is enough for me to bet on that. The touchdown prop, I'm all over. But maybe you just bet Odell Beckham like first touchdown score. Just bet him to score a touchdown anytime because I do like that side of this bet. I just don't think you're getting enough. We haven't seen enough usage or heavy targeting from Odell Beckham. He's going up against a pretty good secondary in the Bengals, in my opinion.
Pierce, do you like these odds?
I do not. If Kupp is the alpha, then Beckham is definitely the beta. Odell Beta Jr. has only gone over this once since 2019. One time since 2019. You go back to his prime, 2014 to 2018, he hit it 16 times over the course of 59 games. Yeah, it's impressive that he went over 125 yards 16 times, but more often than not, he didn't go over this number. I don't like this bet during his prime. I definitely don't like it now. We saw his ceiling last week with 9 catches for 113 yards. I just don't see how he goes over that. As Jeff mentioned, the Bengals may not have a great secondary, but they have a pretty good secondary, and I don't expect them to give up. If they're going to give up 125 to Beckham, then they're giving up a couple hundred to Kupp. That just seems like an insane total to me.
All right, guys. Well, a lot of times in the Super Bowl, role players can take center stage. So could that be the case with Cincinnati's Tyler Boyd? So just 10 catches for 62 yards and a touchdown in the postseason, but you can get plus 220 odds for him to haul in 125 plus passing yards. So are you in on that? By the way, Jeff, this is something he's done 4 times in his career, but not since September 2020. So how do you feel about it?
I mean, I really like Tyler Boyd as a player. Like I've kind of tried to be bullish on him all season. We just haven't seen the usage from him. But we're talking about like we were just talking about Odell Beckham to basically do something similar here and score a touchdown. And his odds were less than half of this. I mean, Tyler Boyd at plus 2,200 just to go over 125 receiving yards. It's not that outlandish. I mean, we've seen T. Higgins go off for in spots like that recently. There's no reason why the coverage just can't shift to Tyler Boyd here. He's more than capable of taking advantage here. I think you could also look at Tyler Boyd over 100 yards and a touchdown. He's been a very, very good player in the red zone for the Bengals as well. He had a 4-game stretch where he caught touchdowns in 4 games. And, the Rams, again, they're pretty good at shutting down teams' number ones, but we've seen them also give up pretty big yardage here. So I actually like this one. I think you're getting good enough odds on Tyler Boyd at plus 2,200 to take the over on that one. I might even prefer him just going to plus 1,600 for a touchdown and just going over 100 receiving yards, so you don't necessarily need the big play either.
Pierce, are they good enough odds for you?
No, I can't chase the yardage prop. I like him in DFS. I think he'll get the receptions. Great chance of getting a touchdown, but I can't make the yardage work. He has a 7.7 ADOT, the lowest of his career. He's not running deep routes. 389 yards after the catch this season, which calculates to 24 yards after the catch per game. I just don't know where the yards are going to come from. Late in the season, he did have a 50-yard catch against the Ravens and a 50-yard catch against the Broncos. Let's say, hey, he gets a 50-yard catch. All right, well, where's the rest of it going to come from? He doesn't run deep routes. He doesn't have a large target share. I think he is someone you want to check out in DFS, but I'm going to avoid Boyd in this situation.
Alan, are you avoiding Boyd?
A lot of good logic in both of those arguments. I, too, like Tyler Boyd as a player, and he's always underrated in your fantasy football leagues, right? He's been a set-it-and-forget-it, boring player for a couple of years, but he is an essential part of this game plan. The backup running backs and the tight ends are more involved than Boyd is at times, so the odds are pretty good, but not appetizing enough for me to play it.
Guys, we don't often get special team parlays. This is really exciting, but we have them on the DK Sportsbook for Super Bowl 56, including one for Bengals rookie kicker Evan Mcpherson to make 5+ field goals in the game at plus 1,600. They don't call him Money Mcpherson for nothing, Pierce. Is that something you might be interested in? Go ahead and tell me why you're not.
I can't wait for next week when we get to talk about punt props. It's going to be awesome. I'm not joking. We will get into punt bets. I guarantee
we
it.
have 2 weeks between the Super Bowl. It's still 9 days away. We're going to hit every single bet on the DK Sportsbook.
If you look at the Bengals' last game against Kansas City, they had 9 possessions in regulation. So we're going to need them to score on half of their possessions, but also we're going to need every one of those to be field goals. I think it's tough to get that many scores and then to have all those scores be field goals. It's just a little bit too far. I could see him getting 3 field goals, maybe 4, but 5 is just way too many.
All right, Alan, how you feel about this one? Or maybe there's another one on there you like. How about Evan Mcpherson, 6+ extra points made? You can get plus 2,200 odds on that.
When the story of the NFL is written in 2021, Evan Mcpherson is going to get at least a sub-chapter. He's the only kicker to get selected in the real NFL draft. I believe it was in the 5th round, and he's been reliable as peak Justin Tucker. Kickers don't matter. Crowd need to take an L on this one. Having a reliable kicker that splits the uprights at 50+ is just such a massive edge. Can he do it? 5+ field goals? Sure. I like the 6 extra points. That one's pretty good too. But the Bengals are unlikely to settle for field goals, especially when they're in plus territory. They know they're the underdogs who need 7s, not 3s. I would, plus 2,000, I'd probably go in on it, but not at the current odds.
Jeff, I know you like to get weird, so you feeling this? Or it looks more like plus 800, Mcpherson and Gay, 10+ kicking points each, right?
No, you're right. I mean, look, it's Thursday. We're already into field goals here. This if there is ever going to be a spot, this may not be a better spot to take a kicker to make 5+ field goals. I mean, you've got the Bengals. They're attempting 4 field goals over the last 3 games. It's a team that even during the regular season was up there in the top 10 in terms of field goals attempted. Then you've got the Rams, who are a top 12 red zone defense. So they're very good at stopping teams inside the red zone. Are we getting a perfect storm here for Evan Mcpherson? Money Mcpherson? I think plus 1,600. If this was plus 2,000, I think I would bite here. So it's very close. And if you're just I don't know, maybe you just like kickers. Maybe you're just the kicker guy in your family. I don't think sprinkling money here is bad. I think the plus 10 points for each at plus 800 probably the slightly better bet. But these are kind of interesting. By the end of the week, I'll probably be all over these and touting them as the greatest bet in the world. But for now, maybe just, I don't know. Wait until you get a little more desperate.
Somebody will bet that.
Yeah, for sure. Can you imagine being the only dude on the couch at your Super Bowl party and you're just sitting there rooting for field goals?
Yeah, just absolutely jonesing.
Everyone's
for another
leave
field goal.
and stop eating kale chips.
Oh my God, we hate this guy. All right, a block in the books.
Yes.
We're on to NBA after this quick break. Welcome back to the Sweat, and hello to the first time to our NBA panel. DraftKings contributors Matt Meiselman, Gary Thorne, and RotoWire's Nick Whalen. Fellas, NBA building blocks time. Need your best DFS plays to build around for tonight's 6-game NBA slate, because we don't know what to do here. So who are you building around at center, Matt?
I'm going to start with Karl Anthony Towns. I think this slate overall is a little complicated at the moment. We have a ton of players currently listed questionable or game time decision with Trae Young, but the one team that we have some clarity on is Minnesota, where a couple guys in the backcourt are questionable, but for the most part, the main players on this team, we know they're going to be out there. And this is just a really, really good matchup for the Minnesota Timberwolves in Detroit against a Pistons team that doesn't defend especially well and doesn't really have the size to compete with Towns. So I just really like Towns in general. I think that more people will play Anthony Davis tonight. And for that reason, too, I think Towns makes for a really good tournament play.
All right, Gary, what's your strategy at center?
Yeah, I'm going to go down a little bit farther and sort of echo something that Matt was talking about, which is that you kind of have to take sure things at this point. And while the Heat might have the most question marks of any team currently, right now they have 4 rotation players, including Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry, listed as questionable tonight. Bam Adebayo is not listed as questionable, and he is coming off arguably his best game of the season. He had a massive double-double on Tuesday against the Raptors that included 32 points, a season high. 32 points, and this matchup really couldn't be better against the Spurs, considering both of their centers are in the concussion protocol currently. The most important of those two obviously being Jakob Poeltl. There are maybe some ways that San Antonio can get creative with their center rotation. We'll get into that in a little bit, but right now this is going to be an undersized interior for the Spurs, and I just think Bam Adebayo, particularly if Butler's out and Kyle Lowry plays, I think that is like the ideal situation for Bam Adebayo. And $8,400 is a pretty reasonable salary, so I think it's a nice starting point.
All right, Nick, do you feel like you got to go with a sure thing at center here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a few guys at the top, and if you don't go with one of those guys, all of a sudden you find yourself in like the 5,000 or 6,000 range, and you're far away from a sure thing at that point. So Karl Anthony Towns is kind of where I start as well. He's at 10,000. Detroit, of course, a bottom 5 defense over the last 10 games. They're a team that we've really been talking about targeting all season. It's a pace-up game for Detroit, a team that typically plays relatively slowly. Minnesota, #1 in pace over the last 10 games. Towns leads all players on this slate in fantasy points per minute over his last 10. So there's a lot of reasons, I think, to shade your lineups toward Karl Anthony Towns tonight. I think I'd stay away from Anthony Davis on the back-to-back. He looked great last night. Of course, got to give him credit. But he's had the wrist thing. He's Anthony Davis. He's always seemingly banged up. Second game of a back-to-back scares me a little bit. So I think I'm going to back off of Davis. But I like the Adebayo call as well. 8,400, I think, is a really good price. He also is coming off of one of his better games, not just since he's returned, but one of his better games of the season. And like Gary said, I mean, we're to the point that we could very well see, and most likely will see, Drew Eubanks starting at center for the Spurs, which I'm gonna take Adebayo on that side of the matchup.
Gary, which forward is a must-play? Looks like Jimmy Butler, questionable, is the highest-priced guy in this department with a toe injury.
The toe.
Power forward is really interesting tonight, just in the way the pricing breaks down. So forward's kind of an interesting position on this slate, especially with all the questionable guys. Maybe one of the reasons I didn't mention Karl Anthony Towns in the first question, I just like Anthony Edwards. I think you might be getting him, even though this is an obvious good spot for anyone on the Timberwolves. I mean, the Wolves just bring the pace. They are the highest paced team in the NBA across their last 10 games. We all know Detroit cannot defend. This is a good spot. There's a reason why the Timberwolves have the second highest implied team total on tonight's slate. But maybe a couple people are scared away from Edwards just because of the variance. I mean, he's had 2 really poor performances in his last 2 games, although I think it's worth noting that the last game was sort of out of his hands. It was just Nikola Jokic went to the bench and Minnesota destroyed Denver's awful bench unit. And by the time that had happened, there was really no need for Minnesota's starters to come back in. So I don't really hold that particular game against Edwards. I just think it was a weird script thing. But this is someone who, even with 2 underwhelming performances in his last 5 games, he's also scored 60 DraftKings points twice in his last 5 games. So the upside is obvious. I think he's in a position to thrive tonight against a Detroit team that just doesn't have anyone to stop him. So hopefully the variance scares a couple people away, but I really like Edwards.
Nick, who's in a position to thrive tonight at forward?
I'm going to keep going back to Pascal Siakam, and his salary keeps climbing. He's at $9,000, but he's very viable tonight against the Bulls defense that, was really good earlier in the season, and now that it's lost some of its point of attack defenders, just has not been very good over the last couple of weeks. Bulls are 24th in defense over the last 10 games. They're a lot more vulnerable than they were earlier in the season. And, not only is Siakam playing really well, some of the best basketball all around of his career, but he's still playing close to, if not more than, 40 minutes every single night. I mean, he got a break and only played 35 minutes in their last game against Miami, and that kind of feels like his floor. That's the worst case scenario if you're putting him in your lineup and he only plays 35 minutes. So I think it's a great thing when you can say that about any player. You're expecting him to basically play 40 minutes. So I love Siakam tonight. And then Mccall Bridges, another player who I kind of keep waiting for his minutes to normalize, but it just has not happened. He's played 40 plus now in 4 straight games. Suns are at Atlanta tonight. I think it's an intriguing matchup, certainly if Trae Young plays. If not, I really like Phoenix's chances here, but Bridges coming off of 2 big scoring games, and it kind of feels to me like Phoenix knows the run that they're on and they want to keep pushing this thing. Like, there's really been no reason why Booker, Paul, Bridges, these guys are all playing like 38 to 42 minutes every single night. I think they realize, like, hey, we have kind of a special streak going and we want to keep pushing it. So I think 6,400, a really good deal for a player who's a virtual lock, to keep seeing minutes close to 40.
Maddie, which forward are you going to consider building your lineups around?
Yeah, so I like the call of targeting Raptors against the Bulls. I think the Bulls defense is kind of a thing that a lot of people are missing. So I'm on the same page there. But there's another team that struggles defensively that I want to target too. And the players here might be a little less popular, and that's the LA versus LA game. Marcus Morris was away from the team for a while for the Clippers. He's been back 2 games now. The minutes are coming up a little bit, and the price has dropped. He was in the mid 6,000s. Now he's down to 5,700. So I think we have a chance to get a buy low spot on Marcus Morris where he's the main guy on this offense, maybe him or Reggie Jackson. But Marcus Morris takes a lot more shots in a situation where Kawhi Leonard and then Paul George are out for extended periods of time. The offense runs through him a lot of the time. The Lakers are also on a back-to-back tonight. They just played Portland. The defense might be a little more sluggish than normal. So I think we're getting a little bit of value on Morris, and I think the matchup might be a little better than people realize.
Hey, Nick, is there a guard you feel you can build around?
Yeah, the 3 guys that I really found myself gravitating toward this morning were Fred VanVleet at 8,800, Chris Paul at 9,700, and Devin Booker at 9,300. So, if you want, you could kind of shoehorn those 3 guys into a lineup. You probably have to pick 2. I think I would lean VanVleet and Chris Paul. Booker and Paul have been incredible during this Suns' latest winning streak. Suns have the best offense in the league by a mile during the streak. Both of them have played super well pretty much every single night. This should be a good matchup against the Hawks, assuming Trae Young plays. Should be a fairly competitive game. So those 3 are where I would start. It should be noted, of course, that DeJounte Murray would normally be just an auto, lineup guy for me, but he is questionable for this game. So TDB, we'll see how that turns out throughout the day. And I also think Steph Curry, if you do feel like really paying up at 10,400, he's in another very good spot, catching the Kings on the second night of a back-to-back. Had that big game against Houston. I'm still not totally convinced that Curry has snapped out of that extended slump, but you really can't ask for 2 better back-to-back matchups to break out of something like that than Houston and Sacramento.
Matt, what do you think? Which guard is catching your eye?
So I want to stick with the Spurs because I do think DeJounte Murray is more likely to sit than to play. The Spurs are on a back-to-back. They just came off this tough loss against the Warriors, and they play tomorrow against the Houston Rockets. So for tonight's game with Murray questionable, I think I'm leaning in the direction of him being out, and that leaves Derek White. I guess White could sit also. He's been resting at times when Murray sits, but assuming White plays at $6,000, he's the guy who runs the offense from the backcourt. This should be a more up-tempo game for the Spurs than usual, too, because they don't have their defense-first center in Jakob Poeltl playing. Drew Eubanks is the likely starter, but this could be a game where the Spurs have to go small. The pace could pick up. So White obviously has more responsibility if Murray's not there, but I also think this game could be different than it normally is for San Antonio.
All right, Gary, which guard are you rolling with?
Yeah, I'm in lockstep with Nick. I think the 2 guys I had written down were Fred VanVleet and Chris Paul. I think Paul is interesting, and this is something Matt talks about a lot, generally as it pertains to totals with the Hawks. But, I think the presence of Trae Young does a lot for me in terms of Devin Booker and Chris Paul's value, because if he's playing, the likelihood of a more tight game script is obviously improved. I mean, Trae Young's a very, very talented offensive player. He also pushes the pace for Atlanta, and he's a terrible defender. So I just think their offensive fortunes improve if Trae Young is playing. So it's kind of funny to think of an Atlanta Hawks player dictating my feelings towards a pair of Phoenix Suns, but I think that is a little bit of the case where Van Vliet's just solid. I mean, on a slate with so many question marks, I am really drawn towards just the sheer floor of the Raptors, like quote-unquote star players. Van Vliet, across his last 6 games, leads the NBA, 42.2 minutes per game. He's one of 3 players averaging over 100 touches per game. He's just going to play 40 minutes. Like, Nick was joking earlier that Pascal Siakam only played 35 minutes. He got a break. The only reason that happened is he picked up 2 quick fouls in the first quarter and had to sit for 9 minutes, which is unprecedented for a Raptor right now. So it really does take, like, an act of God to stop one of these guys from reaching 40 minutes, and I just think they're going to play 40 again tonight.
Matt, how do you feel about taking the route of starting your roster construction and building around a value play?
So I like building around a value play. I think I kind of want to leave one for the end of the night. The low-key injury, so we mentioned a bunch of big names that may not play tonight. The more under-the-radar one, I think, is Ivica Zubac, where in the Clippers game, if he doesn't play, you get probably 2 guys that split the center minutes between Serge Ibaka and Isaiah Hartenstein. I don't think the Clippers can really go small here because the Lakers have Anthony Davis now. It would be a different thing if we had the LeBron center lineups the Lakers were running for a while. But with Davis and Dwight Howard, I think the Clippers do want to play a center. So to me, I think you save a spot in your lineup for either Serge Ibaka or Isaiah Hartenstein. Both are priced in the 3,000s. I probably lean towards Ibaka, but these are 2 cheap guys who, if Zubac doesn't play, you get a lot of potential value from a slot at the end of the night where most people have probably taken up value plays elsewhere. This is a 10 o'clock game. It's the last one, the lock of the entire slate. So I really like the idea of saving a spot for one of those 2 centers.
Gary, and a lot of value plays here in your DK Nation article. Would you consider building around one of them?
Yeah, I think one that I sort of brought up towards the end of that article, it just keeps becoming more appealing to me, although he'll have to be activated is what we kind of have to look out for here. But I kept kind of looking at that Spurs center rotation being like, oh God, like Drew Eubanks, I don't really feel like playing him. Are they going to activate Thad Young? I don't know. Like, that's weird. Zach Collins, man, why wouldn't they activate Zach Collins for this game? I mean, he's in form. Like, this is someone who is playing with the Austin Spurs. He played 27 minutes in a game on the 29th. He played 29 minutes on a game on the 31st. And that first game I was talking about, he went off for 15 points and 18 rebounds. Like, Zach Collins constantly injured. I know you want to be very careful with him, but this isn't one of those situations where if he's activated, we have to say like, oh, he hasn't played in like a year and a half. He might be limited to 15 minutes. His conditioning is fine. He's out there playing. So I think if he gets the call tonight, there's a realistic probability that he plays somewhere between 25 to 35 minutes for a Spurs team that just does not have anyone else. And Collins is at least talented when he's healthy. So I would really keep an eye on that news.
All right, Nick, building around a value play. Is that a strategy you like tonight?
It is, and Matt, kind of stole my Serge Ibaka value play. I think that's the way to go. If Zubac does not play, of course, like Matt said, you have to wait till later in the night. So maybe some people don't want to take that risk. But I mean, Ibaka played 22 minutes against Indiana on Monday, 14 points, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal. And again, if Zubac doesn't play, I mean, he's probably locked into at least 22 minutes, if not more, essentially splitting that time with Hartenstein. I like Keldon Johnson as well in San Antonio. Not a massive value. He's at 5,700, but he's played 35-plus minutes in 4 straight games. Spurs, as we keep saying, are down a few guys. They'll likely be without Doug McDermott tonight as well. So I think that workload continues for Keldon Johnson. And then one other guy that I would highlight is Javonte Green in Chicago. And, of course, with Javonte Green, you're not looking at a ton of upside, but he plays a consistent role. They need his size. They need his athleticism to defend on the wing, especially against a team like Toronto. And he has 20-plus DraftKings points in 3 of his last 4.
All right, finally, fellas, let's switch gears and look at the DK Sportsbook here. So which matchup features the best bets out there today? What do you think, Garion?
So I was a little thrown off by the over-under in the Raptors-Bulls game. I'm just really used to seeing Raptors games in the mid-2 teens, and this is at 225.5. They have been hitting the over quite a bit when playing in Toronto with no fans. I know there was a lot of study put into that during the bubble and how that does affect the over and shooting percentages. But in general, the Raptors are a team just built to hit unders. I mean, across their last 10 games, they have a top 10 defensive rating, and they have the slowest pace in the NBA. They're averaging under 95 possessions per 48 minutes. The Bulls are a talented offensive team. Their defense has been leaky the last couple weeks, but I still think this is a really big number for a Raptors game. So I'm just going to take the under, considering it's hit 9 of their last 13 contests.
Nick, what do you think? Which matchup features the best bets out there?
Yeah, I like the under in the Lakers-Clippers game. 219.5 is the number there. We'll see if that moves throughout the day. And I also like the Suns to cover 4.5 at Atlanta. Whether Trae Young plays or not, that probably affects the line. But I think I would take Phoenix no matter what. Atlanta just 13-13 against the spread at home. They're 7-13 against the spread as an underdog. Just 1-3 against the spread as a home underdog this season. Meanwhile, Phoenix 15-8 against the spread on the road and 12-6 against the spread as a road favorite. So a lot of reasons to think that the Suns keep it rolling.
All right, what do you think, Matt?
So a lot of uncertainty with a lot of different injuries. I'll stick with the game that Darian mentioned, which is one of the few where we actually know who's playing, at least with some level of certainty for both teams. I'm just going to pick the Raptors to cover. I've been anti-Bulls for a few weeks now. I really think that those Alex Caruso and Lonzo Ball injuries are just being dramatically overlooked. And if this Bulls team had to play a full season without those two guys, I don't think they even get in the playoffs. Like, this is a team that can look really good on a once in a while basis, because they do have the high volume shooters, and LaVine and DeRozan could get hot in any given game. But overall, this is not that efficient of an offense. It's an okay one, and it's a really bad defense. And I think the Raptors are a good team. So even though they don't have any fans out there to cheer them on, the Bulls still do have to travel to Toronto to play there. Maybe that's where Toronto's getting their home court advantage from, just because people have to fly to Canada. So I still like the Raptors to cover. It's up to -3.5, but I think it should be a lot higher.
We love you basketball guys. We also love our hockey dudes, and a couple of them will join us next to hand out some unofficial hardware here as we have hit the All-Star break around the NHL. No sticky puck tonight through the weekend because of this thing called an All-Star break, which you likely just heard of for the first time, but we still have some virtual hardware to hand out. A senior fantasy editor at NHL.com and host of the NHL Fantasy on Ice podcast, Pete Jensen, RotoWire's Paul Bruno. Good morning, gents. Good to have you here.
Yes, welcome to the unofficial NHL Awards show. All right, let's give out our own fun fake prizes for the first half of the NHL season as we hit the All-Star break.
All right, we start with our most prestigious award, the Fantasy MVP, otherwise known as the Alex Ovechkin Award. We named this trophy after the Capitals star forward because he led the NHL in fantasy scoring during the 2012-2013 season, which was the first year of DK's existence. And wouldn't you know it, he's leading the way again this year. So does he win his own trophy here, Pete? If not, who does?
You could certainly make a case to give it to him again, but I'm going with a little guy that's been more surprising, Jonathan Huberdeau, leading the NHL in scoring at the All-Star break with 64 points in 47 games, and then also leading the NHL in assists. And his team, the Florida Panthers, has been, I think, the safest, most consistent fantasy team, regardless of who's been missing in the lineup. And still, the thing that amazes me most about Huberdeau over the past 2 seasons is that he's done all this damage at even strength. He's among the top even strength point producers in the league on a separate line from Alexander Barkov, who earlier in his career, those two were attached at the hip. And you could always have said that Huberdeau's success was related to Barkov. You can't say that anymore. Huberdeau is arguably the best scorer in the NHL right now, and I think he has a great chance to keep it going.
All right, Paul, what do you think? Is it Ovi's award to win Ovi's award?
Absolutely. You said a fantasy award, right? Based on fantasy stats, he's there. He's number one. He's among the leaders in point scoring. He has a wide edge in shots on goal, which is also a factor. 23 shots more than any other forward in the NHL this season. So to me, he's the clear number one with the fantasy impact, and the stats back it all up in the leagues that I play in. Number two, I'll give you the top five real quick. Draisaitl, number two for me, on the strength of his 31 goals. That gives him the edge, slight though it is, against over Connor McDavid, who trails his teammate by 9 goals. They're virtually in step with every other stat. Then number four is Austin Matthews on the basis of his goals, his shots on goal, and the fact that he has more blocks than any other guys. And fifth, I rank Chris Kreider, the league's top goal scorer, is fifth because he trails the others by a wide margin in assists and shots on goal.
All right, next we have the Brent Burns Cup for Best Fantasy Defenseman. So Burns has twice led DK in fantasy scoring in 2016 and in 2017. So who's the blue liner that you found in your lineups the most often this season, Paul?
Well, in the same manner, I went through the stats and I come up with Roman Josi as my number one D-man, leading the league in shots on goal from the position by, again, a wide margin with 157 year-to-date. And he's right there with the leaders in points and blocked shots, which also factors in. Number two is Victor Hedman, tied with Fox at 47 points to lead all defensemen, but he has 3 more goals than him. Makar is my number 3, leading all shooters with 18 goals, but he's hindered by low shot block totals and other stats where he trails the other contenders. Fox is my number 4, leading with 21 power play points, tied with Josi, but his shot total is way below the other contenders. And rounding it out, this is for AJ, Chris Letang, narrowly edging Aaron Ekblad, as they're both tied in points, but he gets the lead by a big margin of block shots.
All right, Pete, who's getting the award for you?
You could make a case for all those guys in different ways for different coverage and things like that, but I think there's something to be said about how Cale Makar has come into this season with really lofty expectations. His teammates have been dropping for different reasons, injuries, COVID protocol, things like that. And he still leads all defensemen in points per game, speaking outright points, not DraftKings points, but still that's a good thing every given night, whether he's been playing on the power play with Nazem Kadri or McKinnon, who's one of the best fantasy players in the league when he's healthy on a per game basis, or even some of the secondary guys like Nichushkin and Devon Taves, in different situations. Cale Makar has always risen to the top in almost every single game this season, and he's lived up to the high expectations. So wanted to give Makar a shout out, and he is definitely making a run for Adam Fox. Fox is injured right now, but he's going to be looking to defend his Norris Trophy title. I think if Makar stays healthy for the rest of the way, I think he's a shoo-in for the Norris this year.
All right, we have named our best goalie trophy the Vassal Buck Award, as either Tampa Bay's Andre Vasilevsky or Winnipeg's Connor Hellebuck has been the top scoring fantasy goalie in each of the last 4 seasons, and the two have finished top 2 in 3 of those years. So who is the backstop that has given you the most bang for your buck this year, Pete?
Hellebuck's been disappointing, so we might have to change that award name for next year. We'll see. But I've been really impressed by UC Saros for the Nashville Predators. Paul was mentioning Roman Josi and his impact on the whole offense and how that team has been a surprise. But as far as Saros leading all NHL goalies in starts this season, and he's also top 3 in save percentage. So the days of him being a timeshare with Pekka Rinne are over because Rinne is retired. And now this guy has become a bona fide superstar in this league, and he has the crease to himself. So he's been able to reach a new gear this season. Major shout out as well to Igor Shesterkin, because he's been awesome as well. But I expected Shesterkin to be one of the top 5 fantasy goalies. I had major team concerns about Nashville, but Saros has gotten to the top 5 anyway. So I would give the award to Saros.
Yeah, Shesterkin, Paul. Different goalie, same old Rangers there, man.
Absolutely, and I agree with Pete. He's got the top 2, right? Saros leading the league in saves by 250 over his nearest competitor. That's an indication of just how busy he's been, and more active than any of the other top guys. Second in the league in wins. Shesterkin, for his part, is second to Freddie Anderson with a 210 goals against average, as well as strong peripherals across the board as well. Number 3, Tristan Jarry, on the strength of being the second busiest goalie in total minutes. His 23 wins is there, and third in the league in total saves. Fourth is Vasilevsky, a nod to one of the guys the trophy's named after. First in wins, sixth in saves, right there with the goals against average too. And then fifth, a nod to my favorite guy in the whole mix, is Jack Campbell, among the leaders in all big categories, narrowly edging out Freddie Anderson, who is hampered by the fact that he faces fewer shots than any of the other goalies by a large margin.
All right, up next, top fantasy rookies. So we're calling this one the Austin Matthews Cup, as he's the only player since DK started to crack the top 10 in fantasy points in his rookie season. That was 2016, 2017, came in 8th.
Nice.
So who's your top fantasy freshman so far, Paul?
Well, a number of these guys have carved out roles in the top 6. I want to give the nod to a few people. First off, Lucas Raymond came out of nowhere to lead all rookies with 35 points the year to date, playing right wing minutes on the top line next to Dylan Larkin there. A great spot for him. We've all seen the Trevor Zegras highlights. He's also got 32 points, ranking second in the league in among rookies. Second line center, he's been playing first line minutes as well on the wing with Ryan Getzlaff. Not a bad place in either situation, and I look for him to be right there in terms of the point totals at the season's end. Coming up fast on the outside, Michael Bunting, an older player than most of the rookies this year, but he's got a prime assignment now with Matthews and Marner on the Leafs top line, and he's cooking right now. He's got 29 points, closing in on the other point leaders. The only defenseman in my top 5, another Detroit Red Wing, Moritz Seider, a big guy who was jokingly referred to as a next Nick Lidstrom, but the early returns are very positive on him too. 29 points and a plus minus that's almost flat for a team that is in the lower half of the league. So kudos to him. And then Anton Lundell, playing in Florida, he's moved up and down the roster a lot this year, but fits in among their top 9, and he's got 32 points, so he's my number 5 guy.
All right, Pete, which rookie are you giving this award to?
I'm going to go with the last guy that Paul mentioned, Anton Lundell. If you could lead all rookies in your class in even strength points at the halfway mark or the All-Star break, whatever you want to call it, as a third liner, that is incredible stuff. And I know that the Florida Panthers are a very robust fantasy team and a great home team in general. You know, we like to call them on our podcast, NHL Fantasy on Ice, the puck line Panthers, because they've been extremely effective at winning by more than a goal and a half. So, and Lundell has been a big part of that. Like Paul mentioned, Barkov missed some time. Sam Reinhart, as good as he's been, it seems like every other couple of games he's missing because of the suspension or because of a minor injury or something like that. But Lundell, even when he's on line 3, has been outstanding this year. And I think he's a dark horse for the Calder. I mean, as much as you could talk about Zegras and his flair and Raymond and what the Red Wings guys are doing, including Nedeljkovic, the goalie, none of them have been consistent enough so far to separate themselves from the pack. So therefore, I think it's still up for grabs. And maybe one injury to the forward group in Florida could be all that it takes for Lundell to make that jump towards the top spot among rookies. So I'm giving him a major shout out for what he's done so far against the circumstances, which have been against him.
Well, before we wrap up this segment here, guys, we just want to let everyone watching know that you need to keep an eye on the lookout for a free-to-play DK pool coming up for the NHL All-Star Skills Competition. So it will be available this weekend, and Pete himself helping come up with the questions for the pool. It will be free to play, which is why we call it free to play, and give you a little extra something to cheer for while watching the skills competition. So Pete, that should be pretty fun, dude. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, we're going to be doing our Fantasy on Ice podcast from NHL Fanfare at the Vegas Convention Center. So go and check that out if you're coming to All-Star Weekend. If you're watching from home, check out the podcast and check out the events on Saturday. Of course, the All-Star Games on ABC, and the skills competition is on ESPN. So it should be an awesome weekend. A little bummed that Ovi's not going to be here because he's in COVID protocol, but there are going to be some great stars on display, and great to be in Vegas here to be a part of it.
All right, man. Yeah, behave yourself out there, bud.
Yeah. Good stuff. Pete, Paul, thank you guys so much. We got Super Bowl scoring props on the menu following our final break of the show.
We have about 8 minutes left for this final segment. We have so much stuff inside of it, including DraftKings contributors Jeff Ulrich, Pierce Dietrich, and RotoWire's Alan Seslowsky here for some Super Bowl 56 scoring props. Let's check out some of the touchdown scorer bets available on the DK Sportsbook for SB 56. Looking at the first touchdown scorer for the game. Cooper Kupp, the favorite. Shocker. Plus 450. Would he be your pick, Jeff?
No, man. I mean, for first touchdown scorer, look, I mean, we're not only do we need to pick the guy who gets in the end zone, which is a hard enough task as it is. Now he's got to be first. We need bigger odds here, Emerson. We got to go down the list. And look, there is a very, very big injury here that probably not enough people are talking about. Tyler Higbee sprained MCL, looking very questionable. And two of the Rams' backups are also hurt. Johnny Munt and the other guy whose name I can't remember right now. But anyways, you have a guy in Kendall Blanton at plus 1,600 going up against a Cincinnati Bengals defense. Again, they're bottom 5 in like every metric against guarding against the tight end. Kendall Blanton, if he's out there by himself, it's going to be a great first touchdown prop, in my opinion. Plus 1,600, he'll have all the snaps because legitimately he'll be the only tight end available if Tyler Higbee is out. I think Higbee is fine if he plays at plus 1,400, but I'd rather take a healthy guy in a completely like high usage role with Kendall Blanton. So let's hope Higbee, just sits this one out. We get Blanton because I think plus 1,600 is really good. Also like Tyler Boyd there at plus 1,800.
All right, Pierce, Cooper Kupp with the shortest odds to be the first touchdown scorer. Who else you like?
I'm going to take Kupp. I'll chase longer odds on the other picks, but here it seems like it's going to be Kupp. The first 15 plays of a game are typically scripted out, and if you're going to script out plays, you probably want to script in a couple Cooper Kupp passes, especially when you're in the red zone and when you're in the goal line. I would imagine the team is going to prefer targeting Cooper Kupp. He probably is more likely to catch the ball than Kendall Blanton. So in this case, I'm going to go with the short odds.
All right, Alan, 2 running backs after him, listed at plus 750 in Akers and Mixon.
The defenses have to keep tabs on Cooper Kupp, right? I guess they've been trying to do that all year, but a random thing like first touchdown, I like better odds on T. Higgins at plus 1,200. And the other one is Sony Michel. Cam Akers has had fumbleitis, and that's been a narrative going around. So if they get close on the goal line, McVay has said they proactively want to get Sony Michel the ball. I like the plus 1,600 on him.
All right, guys, you're going to see a trend in this segment because Cooper Kupp is also the favorite to score 2+ touchdowns in the game. The odds aren't great. It's plus 250. So is there someone else you'd rather look at here? What do we think, Pierce?
Yeah, these odds are just too short. He did accomplish this feat 6 times this season, but that also means 14 times this season he didn't pull it off. So if we're talking about something that's very unlikely, then we better get some longer odds. I like considering Samaje Perine at plus 2,200. We can see him getting 1 touchdown for sure. He got a touchdown last week. We just need the Rams to make a mistake, which they do. And we mentioned earlier that they miss tackles. They're 24th in missed tackles. That could open the door to a second touchdown. I'm with Jeff here and trying to chase some long odds.
Right. I mean, Alan, as Pierce pointed out, he did it 6 times in the regular season.
Yeah, none of the odds look like a value, but forced to play it, I would go back, I said, to Sony Michel, plus 1,400. Goal line runners are like closers in baseball. If you get the save, and in this case, the successful goal line conversion, the coach will tend to go back to you. If Michel converts one on the goal line, he should get a second crack at it.
All right, Jeff, what do we think?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's nothing I'm in love with here either, but I'm certainly not going to bet the top of the market in the 2 touchdown, 2 plus 250. Again, touchdown's just such a variable thing, but I go back to the tight end position. I think you can even look at the tight ends on both sides. Like if Uzama plays, I mean, plus 1,500 is pretty fair, but I think you even go bigger. Like, why is the Cincinnati defense plus 6,500 to score twice versus the Rams defense at plus 2,000? I mean, I think that's a big enough gap in the odds to like warrant something. I also think both quarterbacks to rush for 2 touchdowns, it's not as crazy as it sounds. I mean, all it takes is them getting down to the 1 yard line and sneaking in once and then maybe making like a little run. So you're getting massive odds to do things like that. If you're targeting this prop, again, 2+ touchdowns, these are the kind of things you want to think about. Probably not the top of the market.
Right? Hasn't Stafford scored a couple rushing touchdowns like this postseason too?
He has. He's been very active lately, Emerson. Good observation.
Thank you so much. Much like yourself, I occasionally do some research. There's another category here, dude, for a player to score a touchdown and for their team to win. The favorite here, Cooper Kupp again. Oh my God, plus 105. You get better odds with other players though, including Jamar Chase, plus 350. Is Kupp the play here, Alan? Can you give us somebody else?
Well, I guess Cooper Kupp is a household name at this point, and I'll keep to my theme. You say Kupp, I snap back and say Sony Michel. I think he's the best value to score, and if you agree with the applied odds, the Rams are going to win. My take is that Cincinnati is the team of destiny here, and I could tell myself a story where Stafford throws that game-crushing pick 6. He was on a roll with pick 6s at the end of the season, and if that goes down, Cincy D plus the win, plus 1,200, that's my play.
Okay, what's your play here, Jeff?
So with the score and win odds, like you want to make sure. I mean, obviously you also need the team to win. I mean, if Cooper Kupp scores, that's great. But if the Bengals win like 30-24, well, you don't even get the cash in on the Cooper Kupp touchdown. So in most of these cases, you're going to just want to bet the touchdown prop. But I think there's a couple scenarios here where you're going to get some extra value. Like if the Rams defense scores a touchdown, there's very few scenarios there where the Bengals are probably going to be winning the game because it's such a back-breaking thing for a defense to score a touchdown. Kind of flips the script. The one team had the ball, then the defense scores, and it's just like, oh, they got 3 points. So the Rams at plus 550 to score and the Rams to win. The Rams defense just to score a touchdown is plus 400. So you're getting much better odds to do this. And like I said, I mean, the likelihood of the Rams scoring a defensive touchdown and not winning the game, they're probably a lot lower than like just a random offensive player getting a touchdown. So that's probably the one I like best in this one. I think if you're going to the Cincinnati side too, you can look at Joe Burrow again. And if Joe Burrow sneaks in for a touchdown here, I think there's a good chance that the Bengals have just controlled this game. And instead of Burrow passing like 400 yards and be sneaking in for one. So that's another prop I don't mind if you're on the Cincinnati side.
All right, Pierce, we have less than a minute to go in the show. What do you like in this betting department?
Yeah, you can't take Kupp because the Bengals are going to win. Take Higgins at plus 500. Look at Pirine at plus 850. Or the one that I really like, which Alan mentioned, the Bengals defense. And it's the reason that Jeff already alluded to. There is a correlation between a defense scoring and then winning the game. Plus 1,200 for the Bengals. Maybe you consider the Rams. But I think that's the bet to make, is bet one of these defenses to score and win.
All right, good stuff, guys. Appreciate the time.
Great
As
show.
always, that is a show. That is The
Fantastic.
Sweat. The slate is on at 5 p.m. today.
Yep.
Make sure you tune in for that. We got Madden at noon, and you and I will be back tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., and we'll see you then.